Hello everyone. Miss me? I missed you too. Today we discuss Season of the Worthy's PvE content, Trials of Osiris, which is coincidentally also the PvP content, because there is no PvE content. Lol. But yeah, Trials has returned and we are all excited indeed. Unfortunately, excited though we may be, Trials is very sick. You see, Trials was brought back without some of the most important parts of what made it awesome the first time around. As suggested by this video's title, I'm pretty much expecting that the popularity of Trials is going to tank mid-April. Let's get into it with the most important thing right up front. Those of you in the audience who follow my Twitch streams, be prepared to hear something you've heard me say a million times before. But the biggest problem with Trials is loot. What a lot of people don't really talk about is that Destiny's original Trials of Osiris was a fat loot pinata. You grab your 6 bounties, get 2 buds, and give Trials your best shot, because even if your booty cheeks were a fresh tomato red at the end of the day, you still had a haul of loot to show for it. Generous bounties and frequent random in-game rewards served as a major contributor to the health of the mode, because they were an assurance that even just playing at all was enough. They existed, as far as I can tell, to make sure that even casual players had a reason to do Trials every week. If casual players slogged through 6 bounties, they guaranteed 6 legendaries and had a solid chance of getting some unique legendary armor along the way, even without winning a single game. We don't have either of those features now. If you're not really good, the mode is basically an upsetting waste of your time. This leads to a problem where the lowest rung of players is always going to have no reason to stay in the mode, so the rung above them then becomes the lowest, who then have no reason to stay in the mode, and so on. The minimum skill level for it to be worth your while will only get higher and higher week after week, and that puts an insane amount of pressure on players to perform or go without reward. This kills the player base. And yes, we do have bounties now, but they are the worst possible versions of themselves. 2 tokens for getting 15 SMG kills on Widow's Court against enemy teams who would throttle you even if you were to use meta weapons is a hard sell, to say the least. In effect, the bounties may as well read, "Volunteer as tribute so streamers can do double carries without having to reset their card too much." Actually, it's kind of like how some people have to work during the global pandemic to afford rent so that billionaires can keep their pockets full. Shout out to the essential electronics store GameStop. Thank goodness rent doesn't rely on Trials bounties, huh? Anyway, eat the rich. The player base has been vocal about this piece of feedback plenty of times over the Iron Banner questline, but PvP bounties that demand we use weapons that are actively less effective, especially in a game mode that demands we win our games, is just bad design. Hard stop. Nobody enjoys doing that. That sucks. When Shadowkeep arrived with the concept of repeating bounties we could do to our heart's content, it was absolutely a good thing. But you can't just slap that model on every playlist and expect it to become an improvement. It doesn't work here. 10 bounties for 1 random piece of gear the player already has acquired is not a persuasive offer. On top of that, I would argue that having a strict limit on the number of bounties made the playlist feel more worthwhile for a non-flawless player. Limitless rewards might sound better on paper, but the perception is totally different. Non-flawless players used to be able to get a sense of completion out of doing all their weekly bounties, but now that feeling is restricted to players who can get a 7-win card at least. Having a sense of completion that is attainable for players who don't devote their lives to the game is just crucially important, and there isn't one thing like that in Destiny 2's Trials. Players need to be able to enjoy losing because it's still worth it. If I were tasked, personally, to deliberately create a demoralizing reward structure, it would look something like what we have in our Destiny 2 Trials. It is unapologetically anti-casual. Actually, as it so happens, this reward structure also helped catalyze the premature collapse of Trials' PC player base. Our good friend Cammy Cakes made a video pointing out how the new reward structure is actually exploitable, because Trials tokens can only redeem rewards that players have already acquired. Therefore, it is in players' best interest to not dilute their loot pool by avoiding acquiring undesirable rewards, so their token redemption is more likely to give them what they want. As a result, on the second week of Trials, the best way to farm the Astral Horizon shotgun was to continuously reset your card after winning 3 games. Unsurprisingly, the best PvP players are generally interested in god rolls of meta weapons, so this card resetting fiasco Cammy encouraged ensured that the second week of Trials featured gatekeeping to the extent that only very strong players could even get 3 wins, let alone flawless. Furthermore, since you can complete bounties indefinitely, these extremely good players just consumed the playlist for the entirety of the weekend because the tokens never run dry. If bounties worked like they did in Destiny 1, those players would eventually exhaust their chances for loot and stop oversaturating early card matchups with their overkill skill levels. Strong players are supposed to quickly work their way through the early matches of a card so that matchmaking can allow weaker players to experience just a tiny taste of success for themselves. but token farming ensures that weaker players just take a non-stop beating. At this point, we're seeing that weaker players are not only facing heavily unbalanced matches, but they are also not being appropriately rewarded for trying to face them. The fault of this problem is largely on Bungie's hands. There's absolutely no excuse for the fact that going flawless doesn't clearly outperform winning 3 games on repeat for Trials rewards. That is a major oversight. Secondly, the unlimited token system was already a bad fit for this mode anyway, and it was not the right call to move away from the reward structure Trials originally had just for the sake of doing something different. I can't tell if this poor design was a result of lack of manpower issues Bungie seems to have since going independent, or if it's simply another case of them deciding to reinvent the wheel. In any case, the mistakes are understandable, I guess, because it's obvious they were just trying to make Trials integrate into Destiny 2's existing systems. But, since I am a drama YouTuber now, I am legally obligated to say that Cammy did do a bad thing. Being a channel with significant influence in the PvP community, it was not cool to point out that good players could min-max the rewards by beating up on bad players, and effectively circumventing the mode's matchmaking entirely. Resetting the Trials card is basically saying hold X to smurf. The matchmaking is an essential part of the Trials experience, and exploiting that for loot is super unhealthy for the mode. That sort of gatekeeping, especially early in a card, destroys the experience for less serious players, and it will come back to bite us when those players decide to play something that doesn't make them feel like they wandered into the wrong neighborhood. I understand there were no malicious intentions in that video, but that doesn't mean the video didn't do harm. But again, blame ultimately falls on Bungie. The best rewards shouldn't come from farming the playlist, period. At this point, I think I've neatly made my argument that the new Trials reward structure really sucks for weaker players. This actually reminds me of how guided games was set up early on to be more rewarding for the guided games seekers than for the guided games helpers. Seekers get their raid loot, helpers get emblem variants. In both of these cases, Bungie failed to incentivize the necessary players for the playlist itself, instead focusing on who the playlist is quote-unquote designed for. Guided games is designed for seekers, but it needs helpers. Trials may be designed for hardcore players, but it needs casual players. The reward structure should reflect that, and it doesn't. Bungie put the cart before the horse, and we will see the result of that as time goes on. Reward structures aren't the only problem, though. I've experienced more error codes in Season of the Worthy than I ever have before. I get weaseled multiple times a day, and I know tons of players are getting beaver errors more frequently than that. These error codes are problematic enough when you're not playing Trials of Osiris, but if you're playing Trials, they pretty much force you to pick the Mercy card just in case one of your teammates gets disconnected by a network issue that they have no real control over. I've seen so many cards fail because a player gets ejected from a game, and it's so commonplace right now that it isn't even surprising when it happens. Quite honestly, I just don't understand why we can rejoin a survival game that we get disconnected from, but we can't do that with Trials, where losing is just as big of a deal. I have no idea why there aren't protections in place for this sort of thing, but it is extremely demoralizing to lose one of those hard-fought cards that's actually going well to an error code. This would be especially devastating to a team that really struggled to get to that high win card in the first place, and more importantly, it would serve as a strong deterrent from ever getting to that point for a lot of people. If you regularly get disconnected just trying to get 3 wins, the whole idea of going flawless starts to seem totally impossible for multiple reasons at once. Those disconnections really should be outliers, but somehow they're just part of the mode. As an anecdote, I played a card last weekend with my friends ITG Kira and Thomas Kai, shout out to those guys, but Kira got a beaver error code on our 4th game. Thomas and I managed to win 2v3, which put our card a win ahead of his, and then we proceeded to continue winning until Thomas and I were flawless. Afterwards, we played more games with Kira, but we just lost all of them, and he never even got 7 wins, let alone flawless. What I want to know is, why does Kira get a loss in that situation? Why isn't his card updated based on the outcome of the game he was supposed to load into but never did? Why is he getting a loss when he was never in the game in the first place? This problem is so much more obvious when a player is ejected late in the game. If someone gets an error code moments before their team wins the game, even if they did the bulk of the work themselves, they get a loss. And that is just pure trash, man. The card should be based on the outcome of the game, hard stop. Obviously, it's also important to ensure that players who are disconnected can rejoin, and frankly, it's mind-boggling that Trials didn't ship with that feature, but sometimes there just isn't time for that. Disconnections defaulting to an automatic loss when network problems are so prevalent this season is just an unnecessary squeeze of lemon on the wound. Disconnecting already sucks. Why weren't preventative measures put in place to ensure that an unforgiving game mode wouldn't be disproportionately affected by them? Game outcome-based card adjustments, which is to say, when Thomas and I won without Kira, Kira should also get the win for having been on our team when we loaded in. and reconnecting to games when you get disconnected are two features that just make too much sense to not have worked into Trials this time around. More effort should have been put into keeping teams on the same page, because if one person on the team has a bad experience, it's definitely going to bleed over into their fire team's experience and sour it too. I can't imagine putting up with these network problems if I weren't a streamer, by the way. For the entire fun of the evening to be at the mercy of a beaver is just too disheartening to sound like a good time. More power to anyone who feels otherwise, but anybody passing on the playlist for now due to network issues has my sympathy. Also, the cheating problem on PC is just super annoying. My friend Lashega has posted so many clips and comments on Twitter showing examples of people cheating and not getting banned after hundreds of gameplay hours. I have personally played against multiple cheaters with a 98% or higher headshot accuracy with snipers on low-level accounts in Trials. Cheating happens, and I understand that anti-cheat is not as simple and straightforward as people make it out to be, but that doesn't make playing cheaters with any regularity acceptable. Obviously, the barrier to entry is not high enough. On a personal level, my biggest issue with it is that without any kill cam or spectator mode, I can't even be totally sure someone's cheating. I just die in a suspicious way, and I feel like I've gotten outplayed, and it makes me feel bad as a player until I see their sniper accuracy is closing in on 100. There isn't even an obvious tell for people using wall hacks either, although that is pretty obvious if you watch the gameplay. And while cheating is a significant problem, honestly it really pales in comparison to the networking problems and the inadequate reward structure for casual players. These things were very different in Destiny 1. Destiny 1 was extremely healthy for casual players. It made sure that everybody had a worthwhile experience in it, and it made the experience so much more fun than it is now, especially with our higher expectations. There are a lot of streamers going in who are trying to get double carries and that sort of thing. There are a lot of hardcore players who are hoping to make a name through playing Trials, and that sort of stuff just wasn't there. It didn't have the baggage at the beginning of Destiny 1. It was a fresh thing where everybody was a noob and we were all starting on the same page. And now that we don't have that new, fresh start, and our expectations are at the place that they are at, and the reward structure isn't favoring casual players, while the playlist itself is going to be filled with much stronger players, the experience just isn't going to be as fun or fresh or exciting as it used to be, and we're going to see all the problems of the meta in the game that normally just accumulate in Iron Banner expressed every weekend until people decide they're tired of getting killed by beavers and weasels and 3-peeking and supers that you can't contest and all of that horrible stuff that people are going to have to abuse playing against the highest level of players. Not to mention people just holding W with their primaries out or just hitting every headshot because they're either just really good or cheaters and you can't even tell the difference. It's going to be a clown fiesta in the worst of ways, I think, and I don't see any way the Trials can possibly recover from the damage done by setting it up with this terrible bounty system, the no endgame rewards, and the just lack of incentive for a casual player to load into the playlist. It just needs to be fun for everyone, and I just don't think it is. I don't think it can be without serious work, and unless this is acknowledged as a problem and gets a complete 180, I think we're just going to see Trials die in the middle of April. If you think something different's gonna happen, let me know in the comments. I would love to hear and see whatever it is you have to say. I also have Twitter, and I also talk all the time on Twitch. If you'd like to head over there, that's cool too. Thanks so much for watching this video. If you enjoyed it, feel free to like and subscribe, or don't, whatever. Thanks for watching, guys. Have a great rest of your night.